morning, guys, and welcome to Bulletproof. I'm Bob Coleman, your host, and you guys know this is the show where we interview people all over the world, people that, run into some rough times in life, but the thing about it is they never give up, they keep going, and they prove themselves to be bulletproof. And I can honestly say that I'm really excited to talk to the young man that I'm about to introduce you guys on the Bulletproof call today. I was actually just kind of surfing on Facebook last week, and I ran across this awesome video of him and his lovely wife, and they were sharing some thoughts about their beliefs and some things that they're dealing with in their life and what they're doing now. And I was so intrigued that I just reached out to this guy. I was led to reach out to him, and so I did that, and we were able to talk the next day. And, man, it was like this two kindred spirits. I mean, we just connected, and he has an awesome story. I love his journey. I love some of the things that he has going on. So I invited him to be a part of Bulletproof, the Bulletproof platform, are here with us this morning. So having said that, I'd like to welcome Mr. Jeffrey Robinson to the call. Welcome, sir.
How are you today?
Man, I'm doing great. Had a great weekend, and just looking forward to getting into a little bit more about Mr. Robinson and what makes you tick. So if you would just introduce yourself to the audience, tell people a little bit about yourself.
Well, my name is Jeff Robinson, as Robert said. I live in Toledo, Ohio, with my lovely wife, Tammy Robinson. That's who we did the walk-away video with. And we have two sons, two grown sons, 29-year-old Jeff and 25-year-old Justin. Very proud of them and their accomplishments and what they're doing. As a matter of fact, Jeff, the oldest one, served in the Marines for 4 years, and then he also did Army, so he's a veteran. So we're very proud of what he's doing. They're both in school trying to further their goals in life, and so we appreciate that. I'm also a minister of the gospel. My wife and I are ministers. I'm a teacher, a Bible teacher, and then my wife also is a Bible teacher, and she also sings beautifully and plays a piano, so wonderful gospel voice. So we're Christians, we're believers, proud Americans. Maybe sound a little cliche-ish, but we love, God, family, and country. And so that's a little bit about who we are. And also I'm currently a firefighter for the city of Toledo.
Awesome. Well, we definitely appreciate, myself being a former police officer, people always say, I appreciate your service. So I'd like to want to return the compliment to you, sir. We appreciate everything that you do as a fireman, because, it takes a special person. And I'm pretty sure you've heard this before, but it takes a special person to be a fireman and a police officer, really, because, we're trained to think different. Because when a building's on fire, most people run out of the building. You run into the building.
Yes.
So they just want to show you right away you're a 3%. We're different. So,
and then also that firefighter is just a broad spectrum, because we also operate EMS service as well. So we just do a host of things, among firefighting, and of course injury accidents, and other emergency rescues. We do that as well.
Absolutely. Now, one thing that Jeff didn't mention, and he said in his video that I was watching, he said, I don't talk about myself a lot, and people tell me I should. I don't promote myself a lot. People tell me I need to do more of that, and because I'm always promoting other people, but I'm going to start doing that. But he didn't do it this morning, so I'm going to do it for him. He's also he writes books, guys, and he's written a great book. And so if you would share a little bit about your book and what that's all about.
Yes, as mentioned, I'm a Bible teacher, and so I didn't consider myself an author. And I taught a Bible study, a series on the doctrine of Satan, and it took about a year maybe in our Sunday school class. So I taught this, and then there were some individuals saying, you ought to put that in a book. And I thought, oh my goodness, I'm not an author. So, I had all the notes, and so I thought, well, here I am. I have all the notes. I'll put them in some type of form and see if I can find an editor, and then get this book started. And that was back in 2004, and so I put it off for a long time. And a good friend of mine, his name is Dr. Napoleon Burt. We've been friends for over 30 years. He lives in Dallas, Texas. He also has written a book, and he invited me to a Christian Writers Conference in 2015. And basically that took away all of my excuses, and I met some fine editors there, and so we got the thing going, and finally published the book. And so the title of the book is Satan as He Wants to Be Seen, and basically also sort of a twist because it examines the two teachings in Isaiah chapter number 14 and Ezekiel chapter 28. Isaiah 14 talks about Lucifer. I think everybody's familiar with the word Lucifer. And so it examines that. And then also Ezekiel 28 is talking about the king of Tyre. And the popular view is that those passages are referring to Satan, Lucifer as the devil. But what I do, I use commentaries. I use, because I'm not a Bible scholar, I'm a Bible teacher. So what I did is I turned to the Bible scholars and the commentators and used what some of the old commentators said about those passages and how they explain it. And you'll see that it more likely is talking about two kings. In Isaiah chapter 14, it is talking about the king of Babylon. And then in Isaiah 28, it's talking about the king of Tyre. So it's a reference to two human kings rather than to a spiritual being. And so what I do is I lay that out. I lay that argument out in my book.
Who did you write this book for? Here's what I mean by that.
I wrote it probably to the general population. Not it has some theological terminology in it, but because what I did is I used the words of the theologians whose argument and their view is that this is referring to Satan, because they talk about a gap theory. They talk about primordial earth, original earths, and all of these things. So I use some of their language, but in my explanation, what I do is I go through with the biblical explanation and go through the context of each chapter. When I mention context, for instance, if you read in the Isaiah's account, if you read chapters 13 and 14 together, you get a better contextual picture of it talking about a human king. And the same with Ezekiel chapter 28. You have to read chapter 26, 27, and 28 together to get a good contextual feel. And so what I do when I explain that, it's more simpler terms. But when I use the language of, I'll give you, for example, Donald Gray Barnhouse and others, when they write, their language is a little more theological than mine. So that's one of the things that I've been told by some people who read the book, that some of the theological language is difficult. But I'm like, well, that's just when I'm quoting the theologians, not when I'm talking about, explaining it from my standpoint, from the biblical standpoint.
Gotcha. Well, writing a book can be difficult within itself, but the name of the show is called Bulletproof. And so if you would, can you share, and it could have something to do with the book, and it could have absolutely nothing to do with the book. It's just a life journey that you went through personally when things weren't really kind of going well for you, but you were persistent and you kept going, proving yourself to be bulletproof. Can you share one of those incidents?
Yes. Well, that would be early on in my life. When we had a conversation before, when I first talked with you on the phone, early on in my life, I grew up in Canton, Ohio, and my parents didn't really stress college at that time. I'm 58 years old, and it was sort of a time when you just didn't think about it. You just went to school, got good grades in high school, and then went into the work market. And so once I went into the work market at 18, worked at a brickyard, and I thought, I'll be here momentarily, because the going thing in Canton, Ohio at that time was the steel mills. So I just assumed that I would get into the steel mills. I grew up in the church, and so you learn in church that, hey, you have faith in God, you pay your tithes, and the Lord is going to open doors for you and bless you. And so I just assumed that I'd be working in this brickyard for a while, and then I'd move on to the steel mills, be able to make nice income, take care of me and my family. Well, I wound up being there for 9 years, and then the last 5 years of that tenure, I was always laid off every year during Christmas time, which made it very difficult for my wife and I at that time. And then after leaving the brickyard, then I got into the box. Went to a box factory. And when I went to the box factory, worked there maybe a year and a half. By this time, we have our firstborn son. And then I was also laid off from there. Well, after being laid off, I was off for 8 months and couldn't find any work. And I thought, oh, Lord, this is just not working. I can't find any work in the Akron-Canton area. Nothing worked out for me. So that's when I started taking tests for the fire service. And I took a test in the Akron area. I took tests in the Barberton area, which is surrounding Akron suburb. And then so I started taking tests around. Then there was an individual firefighter that I met, and he mentioned about relocating. And I said, well, sure, I'd be interested in relocating. He mentioned Denver, Colorado. And so in my mind, that just shut down. I thought, that's Denver, Colorado. That's just on the other side of the world to me. I'd be away from my family. I wouldn't want anything like that. Long story short, I called my wife and talked with her and told her that. And she said, hey, call the guy back and let's just step out on faith. Let's just trust God and see what will happen. Well, I took the test, passed the exam, and then what I started doing is by this time I'd already placed an application in Toledo, Ohio, and then that's when I was hired in Toledo, Ohio. So it was just that thing, that leap of faith to move outside of my normal life and step out into a different venue. And the door was open, and here I am 27 years later, almost ready to retire from being a firefighter in the city of Toledo. So that was the thing that kept me going, because those 8 months that I was off, well, you talk about demoralized. I'm thinking, how am I going to take care of my family? What's wrong with my faith and all of that? And so 8 months without anything was very destructive to my self-esteem, to say the least. But then the Lord opened the door because I stepped out and moved out into a different direction, and that worked out for me. It took me to a different city. It took me away from the Akron-Canton family. But, it's not that far away, maybe 3 hours away, and we can come back often to visit.
Awesome. You say that, and you say, the 8 months, and it was, but really, how did you do it for 8 months? I mean, 8 weeks, for some people would be challenging. What made you for 8 months? How did you survive? How did you do it?
We just, of course, maintained our faith in God, because, again, we're Christian. We're followers of Jesus Christ. We had a good church family. We had people praying for us, encouraging us, and it was amazing. Many times during that 8 months, our refrigerator would be bare, but we had something to eat every day. That's God's provision. We had something to eat every day. And I can't explain it other than that. The freezer was empty. The refrigerator was empty. We had a small son, and, to feed him and clothe him and do all that we had to do. My wife worked, but I just couldn't find any work. And it was very difficult for me. But I just maintained our faith, and we had good friends and family to encourage us, and we made it through.
Wow. I mean, you made it through proving yourself to be bulletproof, because, I mean, let's face it, so many times people that are faced with similar, situations, they tend to throw in the towel, they tend to give up. And that also says a lot about your wife, because
she's amazing.
She stayed with you. How was it? How did that, as far as you guys' relationship, how did that work out? I mean, was it was it taxing for you or what?
We've always been friends. As a matter of fact, July 28th is going to be our 35th anniversary. So that's what we did. We started off, we said, we're going to be friends. Because, sometimes when you have that husband-wife role, that can be kind of straining. But if you have a friend, even if you have a fallout with your friend, you always make up. You always forgive and always make amends. But no, she's an absolutely incredible woman. She's my best friend. And so she stuck with me through thick and thin. Of course, she had some frustrating days, taxing, but she never would give up. And neither one of us ever gave up. Again, we maintained our faith. There wasn't a lot of arguing back and forth during those times. Of course, we'd had our arguments because of the frustration, but there was always forgiveness. We always stayed together, and we didn't become enemies and turn on each other through that time, and it worked out.
Awesome, and that's you guys are both to be complimented on the journey I know it wasn't an easy thing to do, but again, that's what being bulletproof is all about. It's about, it's not that God never promised us a bed of roses. He never said things wouldn't be rough, but he did promise was he would be with us always.
That's it.
He would never forsake us. And if you're standing on that, and it sounds like that's exactly what you and your wife did, you stood on his word, which is what a lot of people read about, a lot of people talk about, but very few people actually do it. And so when I run across a person, that's why spiritually I was led to reach out to you. I knew it had to be a reason to it. And I have a saying that I coined, and I say the kingdom system, which is God's system, the kingdom system does not make sense. It makes faith.
Yeah.
And that's what I tell people all the time. When you're doing something or going in a direction that you don't quite understand why, usually if God is your foundation, not usually, but all the time, when God is your foundation, you're headed in the right direction. That's exactly what it sounds like you and your wife did. So you guys ought to be commended in that area as well. Reaching out to you, meeting you, it's a pleasure to know you. If there is a message or something that you like to lead the listeners with in reference to Jeff Robinson and what you stand on, and just a message to the Bulletproof audience, what would it be?
The message would always be, have faith in God. And again, I don't mean, and this may sound a little odd, I don't mean the hyper faith of our day to where basically people were teaching you can speak things into existence and call those things that be not as though they were. Only God can do that. But I'm talking about placing your faith in a God who can call those things that be not as though they were. Jesus also said that in this world you will have trouble, but be of good cheer. I have overcome the world. And so with that type of faith in God's word and holding on to his promises, he, as you mentioned earlier, he didn't promise us houses and lands. That was the old covenant. That was the covenant that he made with the children of Israel, houses that they didn't build, vineyards that they didn't plant. He didn't promise that to us. He promised us that he would never leave us, neither would he forsake us. He promised us that he would supply all of our need according to his riches and glory. That's what he promised us. He promised us peace. He promised us that he would guide us and that he would help us if we would just trust in him. That's my advice, to your listeners.
Awesome. Well, Jeffrey, we thank you for being on the call today. And like I told you the first day that we spoke, we can only be strangers once. So we
all right.
We thank her, and I would love to have your wife on another program and give her her own spotlight, man. I would love to do that in the very near future. So we'll set that up, okay?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. Well, you guys have a great rest of the day. I know that you said you were visiting with your mom this weekend, so although I could have met her, tell her that Bob Coleman in St. Louis says hello and give her a big old hug around her neck. If you would do that for me, I would appreciate that.
I sure will.
Have a great day today, guys. And always remember, if you believe you can't, then you're right, you won't. We never give up. We understand that success is based on laws, not luck. And always remember, guys, that all of your getting, get bulletproof. Have a good one.